Okay, we're going 5, 4, 3, 2. Adam Bierman, welcome, and Jeremy Burke. Here with Jeremy Burke, my co-founder and our editor-in-chief here at Cultivated. This is Cultivated Live. We do this every day at 10 a.m. Eastern. Adam, thank you for being here and making time. I don't know if we've had a more anticipated Cultivated Live than this one. We've heard lots of feedback even before we went live as we told folks we were going to be doing this, which begs the question. I assume you knew this book and you putting it out was going to have some response, certainly from the cannabis industry. What made you want to put the book out? We'll start there, then we'll dive in.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about the book with you guys today. I wrote the book because I wanted to share this story for people in the industry and for those that are attached to this cause and this mission. I can't imagine what could be more important as we chart a course into a tomorrow than understanding how we got to where we are today. And so in, sharing what I shared in this book, this account through my living it, the hopes is that, the industry can take what they can take from it and apply it to whatever it is that each individual is working on, moving us towards next, right? We need to end prohibition. We need to destigmatize marijuana, and we need to have safe legal access for adults. And so hopefully the fact that, there was such an intense dynamic, time frame that's covered in this book, there are stories and there are nuggets there for people that aren't attached to the industry or maybe the movement the way that, we all are. It was an opportunity to pull back the curtain and share my account of what it was to be involved in this crazy world of, corporate America, big business, big states, Wall Street, billions of dollars, sharky investors, all the things that I think, at least myself as an entrepreneur and as someone just paying attention growing up in the US to business and to culture, I had heard about those buzzwords, but, I wasn't ever in a situation to become truly educated, right? There was no one giving me these stories before I went on this journey. So I think there are lessons in this for everybody. And the fact that it's wildly entertaining, hopefully helps people want to read it.
Yeah. Let's talk about the book, Adam. We were shared some excerpts from the publisher. These are pretty interesting and gripping accounts of some seminal moments in this kind of ebb and flow of MedMen. The first part I want to talk about, you shared a passage right before the eve of going public, it's called, where you're getting ready to go public, you're on Wall Street basically, and then news comes out about the company. Could you help share viewers like what was going through your head at the moment and tell a little bit about that story?
I think you're referencing maybe the part of that story where I wake up in the morning that we're going public, we're under attack.
Yes.
Man, 3 years, I spent working on this book, living, reliving, reanalyzing, every detail of every one of these stories. And, I think as maybe in some instances hard as that was, I was able to get, so much out of it, but also looking back, like you're asking me to now, doesn't make it less personal or emotional. Yeah. The morning that we went public, in Canada, we were the first at that time, the first of everything. Right. And that was so important to me and to us on our mission because it was breaking through that wall, right? Each of those walls, right? The first unicorn, right? Some institutional investor somewhere decided there was a weed company in the US worth over $1 billion. That made people pay attention, right? We were the first US company of size like that to go trade on a stock exchange. It happened to be the CSE. And when we went public, our market cap was larger than the combined market cap of the entire CSC. But nonetheless, we did it. And the legitimacy that that bring, you know, to MedMen and to the industry, you know, it was such a watershed moment. And so there were all of these moments that were kind of happening back to back. You know, we had momentum. And, you know, I remember waking up at the hotel, and I had a full day of media lined up. You know, the idea is I go and talk about the industry and talk about MedMen. It's now available for people to actually own. They can buy shares in it. And as I turned over and got ready for my run, my phone was already blown up with God knows how many text messages, and we were under attack. One of
And this was
these,
like 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, right?
I wake up, yeah, I wake up pretty early, but it was in Canada, and so they started early as well. And you know, this was the game, right? I had entered a whole new arena. Again, I didn't have any experience in this arena. Nobody in the marijuana industry had this specific experience yet, which was what would happen as a result of you breaking through all those walls. What was waiting for you on the other side, right? And waiting for me in that moment was a newsletter publisher in Canada who I had blown off as a joke, or at best, and extortionist at worst, wanting us to pay him a lot of money to promote our stock when we listed, and ignoring him was a bad idea. And he came out with a smear campaign the morning of, and he leveraged his resources through his newsletter to go full on. And so I woke up to that news while juggling everything else I was juggling. Put aside the fact that my family was asleep in the room next door, and this was supposed to be a moment on a personal level as a father and a husband I was sharing with them, you know, and I just, I put that war paint on, and I went to work. But we definitely got smashed around that first day. And man, I mean, there's a scene at the end of that story where I'm sitting on a curb outside of a restaurant, you know, some dirty curb in New York City somewhere, and my family's inside waiting for me. And I just can't go in because I just, you know, it was a lot. It's overwhelming. But, you know, I put my face back on and went back to work. And that's one story. You know, there were a million stories, and we did our best in the book to bring out the stories that were, I think, you know, most poignant or telltale of what was really going on at the time.
Yeah. One more anecdote I'd like to talk about, and then we can sort of talk about the larger frame here. We were shared a story about, you know, the first Trump administration. You know, MedMen was a public company, and Bill Barr, the former attorney general, really had the industry in his crosshairs, and you specifically in his crosshairs. Can you talk about a little bit what it was like to deal with that, manage that? You know, given that you were young at the time, and you certainly weren't, you know, a 55-year-old CEO of a public company for 10 years.
Well, I think you put any 55-year-old CEO of a public company for 10 years in a chair and say that the most powerful lawyer in the United States government has it out for you, and they're probably not going to be fully prepared. But, you know, to that point, yeah, you know, there's there's so much to this. And again, we get into a lot of the depth of this in the book. And there's so much that I didn't even know at the time, right? It came out after I had even left the company. But yeah, to your point, Bill Barr made it his one of his personal missions, regardless of the legality or the jurisdiction that he didn't have to, you know, get involved. He made it one of his personal missions to stymie and to squash this industry from happening. And I guess he didn't have a ton to worry about until we showed up. And when we showed up, you know, what was happening was, you know, we were breaking down these doors or these walls, and we were blowing holes through them. And then the industry was walking or sprinting through those holes, and we were moving forward to the next step. But every time we reached one of these, you know, walls, it was us breaching the wall, and it was me at the front. And like anything else in life, you breach enough walls, you get smashed in the face enough. There's enough shrapnel flying around. And that was us, and that was me. And in the Bill Barr instance, it got to a place where, you know, we had an agreement with another company in cannabis called PharmaCann for us to acquire them. And doing that would have really finished off that first sprint of building MedMen, creating a permanent industry and asset class and future. And everything went into, all of our resources and energy went into making that acquisition a reality. It gave us all the markets that we didn't have already. It really finished off our footprint and our idea of bringing mainstream marijuana access to Main Street USA. And unbeknownst to me, Bill Barr made it a mission of his and a directive to one of his underlings to kill our deal. And all I knew at the time as the CEO of MedMen was I was going through one of 50 things during that time, where we were combating forces larger than ourselves. And so, at that time when we announced that merger, and again, in the book, 6 months after the merger was announced, one day prior to 6 months, we got a letter from the DOJ saying, no, you cannot close. We have further questions. Our lawyers didn't understand it because we didn't even fall under, their jurisdiction based on, where we were, where PharmaCann was, and the fact that, there was nothing that would have triggered or should have triggered them, to dig deeper. Furthermore, there's a point that everybody always glosses over. I'm at that time, a federally illegal business. You're not even giving me the respect of legality. You're saying that in a worst case scenario, I can still go to jail. Yet now in this instance, you are going to treat me like AT&T and T-Mobile, and you're going to have a personal vendetta, immersed into the conversation to make sure it doesn't happen. So I didn't know that. We were the first to go through what is called HSR review, which is an antitrust review. At the time, the people following what we were creating, they were all doing their own M&A activity, right? We were always a step ahead with larger, more substantial, but then they would follow suit. And so what happened was we got blocked. And at the time, getting blocked on that deal was really it was devastating to our public, to our equity, to the value of our business, right? People had anticipated that deal was going to get done. We had planned and invested in it, and then it just all fell apart. Not a month later, but 11 months later, right? Or a year later. But in that same time, even though ours fell apart, Bill Barr ended up then resigning as the AG. And the very next year, and it's in the book, all of these mergers took place for billions and billions of dollars without interference. It was unfortunate, right? Like so much of the story, being first, taking the shrapnel, he took it out and, I can't win that fight. And I didn't even know I was fighting against him until the person who he gave the directive to was part of a whistleblower case against him and went in front of Congress and testified that Bill Barr told him to specifically come after me and MedMen and kill the PharmaCann deal. Think about, the finger at the time that we had on this one small part of culture and society where we were having that much of an impact to draw that much of attention and in his eyes require, that much attention. That was the purpose. That's what we needed to do to shake things up. This was stagnant. There wasn't movement, when I showed up and opened the Treehouse in 2010. But if we want to end prohibition and we want to destigmatize cannabis, there has to be movement. And movement is loud. And so we happened to be in that, in that chair for that period of time. That's what happened with Bill Barr.
Yeah. Zooming out a little bit, you and I, in my former job, Adam, have talked about this. You started MedMen in your late 20s, right? It grew to a multiple billion-dollar company relatively quickly, and now it's zero, right? In your view, what areas would you sort of take responsibility for in terms of making different decisions, both at the beginning or along the way? And what, in your view, was just outside of your control? I want to give you credit for how hard this was to do, right? But there's certainly certain, you were the CEO. There's certain decisions you could have made differently. So how do you kind of think about that tension?
Great question, Jeremy.
Yeah.
I was accountable for everything. I was the founder of that company. I started it out of my apartment in my beach cruiser bicycle. I think that it's important as a founder, CEO, as an entrepreneur to never lose sight of that. There is nobody else accountable other than yourself, good, bad, and ugly, right? I think it's important, at least for myself, as a 42-year-old man now, right, that I give myself credit being accountable for building MedMen from nothing, from manifesting this idea about mainstream marijuana to stores on Fifth Avenue and in Beverly Hills, right? I'm accountable for that. I'm also just as accountable for the mistakes, moving too quickly, not slowing down to optimize where we were in a moment, taking on too much debt. I made so many decisions every single day, and I still pride myself on the ability to make as many informed decisions as possible, take an action, and receive a consequence so that I can be more informed next time. There was a time where I was making so many decisions per moment. If I got half of them right, that would have been great. This is uncharted. Look at what we were talking about. And again, back to what I talked about earlier, illegal. What mistakes did I make taking on too much debt? I mean, we definitely shouldn't have taken on that debt. We should have slowed our roll. And it was also true that as a federally illegal business, our access to capital when asking for numbers that had never been invested into marijuana, or I don't even know, a federally illegal business by those type of investors before. Did we take money from some of the wrong people with a lot of the wrong terms? Of course we did. Sometimes it worked out. I was accountable for making that call. Sometimes it didn't. Until I left in 2010, I'm accountable for everything.
Given the nascentness, I don't know if that's a word, of the cannabis industry,
It is now.
It is now. Yeah. Was there a way at the beginning, to get enough maturity in the door, when you were making these decisions? Were you able to find people to put around you that could sort of help frame, this is how you should go public, this is the people you should take debt from? Or was it sort of we are just growing so fast, we got to just make these decisions over and over and over again?
Another great question. At every step of the way, with my CEO hat on, I did reflect on a transformational growth we had gone through, whether it was the private equity funds, whether it was getting ready to go public, whether it was being public. Every time we had one of these moments, I reassessed our situation and I tried my darndest to bring in experience. My dad is prevalent in this book. And, one of the things he taught me was that you want to surround yourself with people who have seen the movie before.
Right.
And that was something that, was with me from the beginning. Unfortunately, as an example, when we were trying to go public and then we finally figured out how to do it and we knew it was imminent, I couldn't get a headhunter, a recruiting firm that worked with public companies, that worked with Fortune 500 companies to work with us. They wouldn't take my money. I couldn't even hire a headhunter and say, I'm looking for these C-level positions. When we formed a board, through, and Jay Brown is in the book, and he was, a mentor type figure on the board at the time. People wouldn't join that board. If we were a tech startup, right, and we had a new product, I could surround myself with people who had seen that movie 10 times, all the way around, birth, life, and death, and help me use what I had unique, understanding of cannabis, the cannabis consumer, the power of the plant, brand, all the rest of it, and mix it with their expertise, which is, this is how the world of big finance works. That was not available to me, right? And so instead, and again, it's in the book, I get a backstabbing chairman who is so conflicted that, you know, in the real world, if we were talking about tech, they would have never allowed him on the board in the first place, let alone everything else that was going on. But we were marijuana. It was the Wild West. And every time I tried, you know, it wouldn't work. So what did we do? I looked at it like, you know, how do I get a minor league ball club to win a big league game? They got to be more prepared. They got to work as a team. They got to have a mission. They got to believe more. They got to fight for one another. You know, all these things that we got to invest in, you know, helping them. We got to train them. This isn't normal, right? We have to get them to outperform, myself included. We have to get them to outperform themselves. And so much of my energy, you know, was spent investing in that. And, you know, that was at the time the best that I thought I could do. So I hope that answers your question, but that's how I thought about it at the time.
Yeah.
Adam, I'd love to ask, you talk about, you just referenced the Wild West. In some respects, the industry today is still the Wild West, just not early Wild West like you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that time has passed considerably. Do you still follow the industry and what's happening? And I guess B and C, do you think some of the same mistakes or challenges or newness to it has gone away? Or are you still seeing people follow the same pattern that whether it's around debt or not surrounding themselves with, people that have done this before? Like, are you following what's happening? And I guess what's your view today? And maybe sort of a follow on is like the full circle nature of like Bill Barr is not going to be the AG, and the AG,
Right.
like, and the current president and the other one that ran the other candidate are like in favor of reform, at least in words. Like, that's a lot has happened, and in some cases not a ton has happened. Like, how closely do you follow it?
I mean, this is still my mission in my life outside of my family. This is the cause I attached myself to and believe the most in, and where I believe I can individually have the most impact. So from that regard, I do follow it and I do care greatly about it. I think what I would say about it is that the birth of this industry and the way in which, you know, the mainstreaming or the destigmatization of cannabis has evolved as a result has opened consumers' minds to the potential benefits of effect-based products. Where before, growing up, there was shame, right? If I needed something to help me focus or sleep or do anything like that, there was a shame to that. Even when I started MedMen, there was still that shame. I think one of the things cannabis has done is it busted that door wide open. There's a pride to enhancing your life with plants, with organic materials, right? In a world where chemical, you know, synthetic things are everywhere. I think there's a shift in our culture. And so what I would say about the industry now is, where is the innovation? Where is the innovation to meet that new consumer? Because that consumer isn't where they were when I opened, you know, the MedMen on Fifth Avenue or in West Hollywood. That consumer needed to be coddled. That consumer needed to have an arm around them and told it's going to be okay. That consumer needed to be educated in a way that didn't make them feel ashamed, but made them feel proud to be taking control of their own, you know, health and wellness. We're in a different place now. So how is this consumer being addressed along the regular routine day? And what I see happening is, without innovation inside of what we're going to call the cannabis industry, you bet innovation is happening within all these other conglomerates. You bet British American Tobacco, Altria, Big Alcohol, Big CPG, you bet, and I know they're all over this. And so I think this idea of building something permanent, this asset class, this industry that was inclusive, that always would be hunkered down by the fact that this is an organic, available, you know, on earth plant that can actually have such a great impact on health and wellness. I think this idea that we could keep it there, it's now up to what the industry is today to innovate enough to make that happen. Or I think a lot of this is going to be taken away. I think you're going to find cannabinoids available through different formats. And I think that consumers are only going to put up with going out of their way for a shopping experience to buy a singular item in a brick and mortar retail outlet for so long, when people can deliver them that effect via Amazon or at their grocery store, even if it's with other compounds. So where is that innovation, and how are we going as an industry to continue to own that and stay relevant so that we can protect, this opportunity? Because that's what it is. It's an opportunity for our culture to have this be just a normal mainstream part. And I would hate to see that not happen, because big pharma ends up owning cannabinoids.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because we've seen so much around hemp-derived THC products
Of course.
across the country, and we see big cannabis companies, multi-state operators, investing heavily in a much less regular, lightly regulated part of the THC industry, let's say, and shifting parts, or in some cases whole areas of their business to that, because they can ship it around the country. They can have it's much more like a CPG product, bought and sold in a CPG way.
I mean, I think if you take a car company, Ferrari, there's all this movies, all this media about them. Let's take Ferrari. Like, it's one thing if Ferrari can make one car, right? And everybody thinks that's the greatest car in the world. But to be a real company, like, this industry needs to be a real industry. We've got to make cars for all kinds of people with a range, even if it's, a range within Ferraris on the high end and, somebody else on the low end, but within a range, we've got to provide options for people. We can't just be a one-trick pony, right? And so as I see, people in the industry expand into beverage, right, or expand into these, other hemp-derived cannabinoids, I have hope. But what is it really going to look like? Because I just don't think the answer is people will just buy 12 packs of, lightly sprinkled hemp-derived cannabinoid THC something in their grocery store, and that'll be it. I don't think that's it. I think it's a much larger opportunity, and I know that those big organizations I'm talking about that are invested directly in cannabis now, I know that's how they look at it. So what's next? And there's a ripe opportunity. But to end this, if the industry waits around for regulations to change and continue to use regulations and taxation as an excuse for why the industry cannot be successful, then there is no future, because there's no future unless you take it into your own hands.
So, Adam, we're coming up on time here, but I just wanted to give you one, final question. The story of MedMen, in your part of it, has been written, right? Through us, you can talk to the industry. Through this book tour, you can talk to the broader world. Like, what do you hope that people take away from the story of MedMen and the story of yourself?
Well, as you alluded to, right, and it sounds like you're reading at least some of the book. I mean, it's a very personal story. This isn't the story of MedMen or the story of marijuana. It's my story. I just happen to be fully immersed, throughout a chapter of the history of cannabis. So, I hope that on a personal level, as a father and as a husband and as someone who felt responsible for employees and for people who shared my vision, I hope there's takeaways for people, in the decisions that I made, in the stories that I'm, willing to share unvarnished, so that there's context behind, decisions being made. I'm hopeful that, if I was 21 and I could read this book and then I could go have this journey again, I think I would have this journey in a happier, healthier way. And I think for the industry, as I said at the beginning, man, it's time. It's time. It's not time to sit around and complain. It's time to innovate, right? And let's have the conversation about, it's too hard to innovate today because of all the regulations. We innovated back then. And there is no argument, especially now that I'm sharing these stories of what that actually looked like, right? There's no argument that there's a clearer path to executing against innovation in today's environment than there was when we started this, or the book starts Treehouse in 2010. Let's learn and let's be better, and let's go finish this thing.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for making time, for sharing excerpts from the book. Look forward to reading the full amount of it. I really appreciate the time, the energy, and both to put the book together, but also for your time this morning. Jeremy, thank you for being with us this morning as well. And we will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern with Krista Raymer, who is our cannabis retail expert that we join with every Thursday morning. Adam and Jeremy, thanks so much. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you guys, have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.